of that nature, as opposed to modern day weaponry. So if you want a classic kind of war movie, go see Red Cliff. Find a way to download that and watch that at home. And one of my particular favorites, probably because I have a lot of Scottish heritage on my side of the family, is Braveheart from 1995. Again, Mel Gibson was the director, and it just was an amazing epic. You know, it's truly a stirring film. It's based on the truth of Scotland and the truth of the battles between Scotland and England and so forth. And Mel Gibson starred in it. It was 1995, and even though it is a medieval war epic, the battles between the nations surrounding the United Kingdom are ageless. They're timeless. And when you see this one, of course, it's very, very compelling. You know, the real William Wallace, on whose character Mel Gibson's character is based, he actually lived in exile in France for years following the Battle of Stirling before his execution. So there's a little twist of history here and there. That's the way movies work. They may change the facts to suit the audience or to make it more cinematic. But Braveheart is always worth a watch. So Braveheart, 1995, directed by and starring Mel Gibson. Just looking at my notes and looking at some of the comments that I was making about these sorts of things to myself. There's a 1945 film by John Ford, and it's called They Were Expendable. And just the title alone gave me pause, because when we think about war and we think about collateral damage and we think about troops that go and never come back, sometimes they were treated as they were expendable, that they were part of the war machine and there's a price to be paid and there are lives to be lost. But we can never forget that. We can never forget those people and the sacrifice they made, because every war involves freedoms, choices, national beliefs, individual beliefs. It's no one is really truly expendable. So the title on this really caught me. They Were Expendable from 1945, and I don't agree with that. I don't think any one of them are expendable. No one who goes to war is. They are always to be honored and remembered and appreciated, because they pay such an incredible price. And John Wayne was in this movie too. He's been in a lot of combat movies, of course, in his career. But these combat scenes are just spectacular, and they shot some of it out in the Florida Keys. Just as a little bit of trivia about how some of these things get made. John Wayne at one point delivers a eulogy in the film, and some people say it may be one of his best pieces of acting ever. So if you're a John Wayne fan, you might want to take a look at They Were Expendable from 1945 and see what you think. Make your own decisions. Have your own opinions. I'm just sharing my own with you at this point. Moving on to 2008, for example. Now, this is a completely different point of view here, completely different type of conflict, but it is a war. It does reflect war. And it was Steven Soderbergh's biopic of Che Guevara. And it was called Che, C-H-E, in 2008, directed by Soderbergh. And it was a biopic about his revolutionary military campaigns, what made him famous, what made his name memorable. Several campaigns, as a matter of fact, and guerrilla warfare in two parts. Part one of that movie was called The Argentine, and it was, gosh, golly, it was lush, and it was colorful, and it was rich, and it was all about the Cuban Revolution. And then part two, Guerrilla, was a much more sedate, somber, handheld camera technique, that sort of thing, on Bolivian Revolution of 1967, which failed. And it's an interesting dichotomy about how Steven Soderbergh makes contrast within a film and how he can tell multiple stories. If you ever saw Traffic, you would know what I mean. But Benicio del Toro, of course, was huge. He was huge in this. And the Soderbergh's depiction of combat was an interesting take. It was drawn out. It was convoluted. It was unsettling. It was unsure. Purposefully, this was his technique of making it. And as someone smarter than me said one time, it was fundamentally inglorious. It was not a glorious staging of combat. It was very, up and down and back and forth. So, Che by Steven Soderbergh, just to give you something interesting. Oh, and to go a little further afield, one of my particular favorites I'm just going to throw in here because it too was a war, and that was The Last of the Mohicans, 1992, directed by Michael Mann. Daniel Day-Lewis was amazing. I realize I am not objective. As a woman, I thought he was just dynamic. He was riveting every time he was on screen. I just couldn't take my eyes off him. Daniel Day-Lewis really made a mark for himself in 1992 when he did The Last of the Mohicans. And Michael Mann, of course, has been renowned as the director that he is. American Indians, white colonists, French, British, Europeans, all kinds of elements are in this film. And the romance between Daniel Day-Lewis as Nathaniel Hawkeye and Madeline Stowe playing an English debutante, Cora Munro, was a little weak. But for those of us women who were really riveted on watching Daniel Day-Lewis, it didn't matter who the woman was, we were enjoying him. So it is well worth seeing. It's a spectacle. It's visually rich and incredible. There are moments that are just heartbreaking and awe-inspiring, but The Last Mohicans, 1992, I would throw that in. And for those of you out there who are big on Westerns and Civil War movies, there are obviously a lot of those too. You might want to jot down Ride with the Devil from 1999, directed by Ang Lee. It was different than a lot of Civil War movies because the point of view was on the Confederate side. And Ride with the Devil also is pretty blunt and pretty direct about the racial elements that were a big part of that era. There are gentlemanly guerrillas, which is always a surprise. There were actors you might not think would be in there, like Tobey Maguire and Skeet Ulrich. There's interesting actors, interesting approach, a lot of socio-political layers, but when you get down to it, it was the Civil War. It was gritty, and it's well worth a watch. I don't know how much more time I can cram, how many more things in, but I'm just going to still kind of go through my list here. Oddball movie, my goodness, if you want to see Inglourious Basterds from 2009 by Quentin Tarantino, that's probably one of the strangest and bizarre cinematic takes on a conflict that is fact-based in history. It was an actual thing, but if you know Quentin Tarantino's work, you'll know that if you watch Inglourious Basterds from 2009, you're going to see something you haven't seen unlike anything else. And then if you want to get into perhaps a more hard-hitting war piece, take a look at Jarhead from 2005, directed by Sam Mendes. It was an adaptation of a memoir about an actual military experience during the first Gulf War, and really just an amazing film. So Jarhead, 2005. And before I run out of time, I suppose I really have to take a look at the movie that some people love, some people hate, before we run out of time, and that's Apocalypse Now from 1979. Love it or hate it, oh my goodness, you'll never forget it. There are people who call it a masterpiece, and they say that it is, one of, if not one of, Francis Ford Coppola's best, perhaps his best. It talks about, Coppola's driving premise, which is war turns men into monsters, and it leads them into descent of lack of reason and makes them into, psychotics and so forth. I'm sure that's true to a certain extent, no matter what war you're talking about. But it doesn't necessarily glamorize war and makes people who perhaps get too carried away with forgetting the suffering and the mental anguish and so on, and gives you food for thought. So love it or hate it, Apocalypse Now from 1979 is certainly a piece of history, a piece of cinema when it comes to real wars in real places. Don't miss Lawrence of Arabia from 1962. That's awesome. And Thin Red Line, 1998. I could go on, but I don't have any more time. So I'm actually going to have to wrap this up. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for sharing a little time with me and letting me ruminate and reminisce about movies that I've seen regarding subjects of war of different kinds in different places and different times, different cultures, because it's not just us over here in America, or it's not just the Middle East, which is certainly of major concern to all of us, where our people are and people who are fighting a good fight for the reasons they believe in. It is a global situation. So when you think of war, just remember one thing: they really are not expendable. And we love them all. We thank them all. And welcome veterans home from Vietnam. And remember World War II and much more. To those people you know who are veterans, give them a hug. Thank them for their service. And for me, Jeannie Corcoran, that ends my musings today on the subject of war in cinema. And hope you'll listen next time. Thanks for being with us. We're signing off. Talk to you later. I want to thank you for listening. I'm Jeannie Corcoran, your Sarasota County, Florida Film Commissioner. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can go to www.filmsarasota.com, or you can call us toll-free from wherever you are at 888-765-5777, extension 104. We're easy to get a hold of. And we like email. You can email us at info@filmsarasota.com, and we check all of our email. If you don't hear back from us right away, it's not that we haven't gotten it, but we might have a computer glitch. I hate to admit it, but it happens a lot. We've had emails that disappear for a month. We've had phone messages that disappear for 2 months, but they show up eventually. So we will get a hold of you. Or you can get a hold of us, ask us questions, and if we can help you, we will. And if we can't, maybe we can steer you in a good direction to somebody who will help you. And that's it for me. I'm Jeannie Corcoran, and you've been listening to Entertain You on the Radio Ear Network, and this is the Society Bites network of programs. Thanks for listening. Talk to you again soon.